We should be keeping realtor safety on the forefront of our mind all year long, but September is Realtor Safety Month, and this week we have Carl Carter Jr. joining us to talk about his experiences and his advocacy for realtor safety.
Safety is not just a one and done. You have to build in those habits.
Welcome back to Talking Real, brought to you by the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. This is episode 139 of Talking Real, and this week we have a special Realtor Safety Month episode that we're bringing you. I say it's special, they're all special. But you're joined right now in the studio by Jeff and Nabil. Nabil, how are you?
Doing well, Jeff. Getting a little chilly. I see you got your vest on.
I got the vest on.
Yeah.
Seasons are changing. Fall is coming in, so stay warm out there as the seasons change. Like I said, this month, it's September, it's Realtor Safety Month, and many people may have had the opportunity to listen to Carl Carter Jr. speak before, and we're very excited that he was able to set aside some time to come talk to us about realtor safety. Obviously, he has had a tragic experience in his life, but it is a lesson that all realtors need to take to heart so that they can implement all the necessary tools to be safe out there doing the job.
Yes, for sure. And even though this is coming out on the last day of September, which is Realtor Safety Month, this really, as we talk about, has to be an ongoing, continuous process throughout the year. But the month does help highlight it a little bit.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in and bring in Carl Carter Jr.
We're joined here on Talking Real by a special guest. And, September rolls around every year, and that is Realtor Safety Month. And really, realtor safety is a year-round thing, but we want to make sure we are doing a special job to try to highlight it in the month of September. So this month, we have brought on special guest Carl Carter Jr. Carl, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Honored to be with you guys.
Well, we're very excited to have you back with us. You haven't been on Talking Real before, but you have certainly participated with the Oklahoma Realtors in our annual conference before. And we're just excited that you had an opportunity to come back and chat with us on the podcast. And for those, we always have new realtors coming in, and it's always a good time to talk about realtor safety. So before we get started, though, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and your involvement in real estate so people get a better idea of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am your neighbor to the east. So I am from Little Rock, Arkansas, and lived here most of my life. I am a realtor, hang my license with RE/MAX Elite here in Little Rock. And I think probably speaking to my greatest passion and the reason why we're here today is that I founded the Beverly Carter Foundation. And as much as I possibly can, I volunteer my time along with many other people to help raise safety awareness within our industry so that everyone gets home to their family safely.
I think that's such an important topic, like we've talked about.
It's a challenging topic, of course. We have seen plenty of stories that are tragic and difficult, and plenty of close calls. And I know you have very close personal involvement. And so for those that don't know, can you give us a little bit of background about how this became such a passionate topic for you?
Absolutely. My personal connection to this topic is driven largely by the loss of my sweet mom. My mom was Beverly Carter, and actually, today, it's the day that we are recording this, my mom is actually still missing. My mom had been kidnapped while showing a property on September 25th, and we later found out that the people that took my mom had perceived her to be wealthy, and they planned this elaborate scheme to kidnap this rich realtor and hold her for ransom. And when that didn't go as they thought that it would, which in large part I think is credit to my mom. She had done so many things right for her personal safety. But when that plan didn't go as they thought that it would, these awful people made the decision to jump from kidnapping and ransom to kidnapping and murder. And so, in the aftermath of losing my mom, I, up and through the justice portion, I really kind of served as a voice for my mom, because she had no voice. Her voice had been taken. And I just spoke to how loved she was and the void in this world without her. And I also spoke to her character. And what happened as kind of an unintended consequence is that I realized there's such a message in my mom's story. There's so much we can learn. And so I created this nonprofit. And, as I've gone down this path the last few years of really trying to heighten awareness, it's been really concerning that, yes, this happened to my mom and I'm forever impacted, but I've met a lot of agents that have been victimized. And so I think we can do better, and we keep talking about it and hopefully inspire people to make smarter choices with their business.
Yeah, I know that's a difficult story, and that you put yourself constantly through reliving it by talking about it, because you travel kind of all over the place and talk about realtor safety. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've been to, a couple of the Canadian provinces, almost every state here. And it's tough. It absolutely is tough. Because to your point, it is every time when I tell it, from the moment that and the steps that this couple used to deceive my mom, through her kidnapping, through her murder, through her trying to get justice for her. It does open to old wounds, but I'll tell you, I think we see it in the news in a number of ways, that there is power in a story, even tragic, awful stories. Stories, drive us to act. They drive social change. They drive, change in regulation. And, if nothing else, I hope that my mom's story can inspire change. And so that's why I tell it, because I do think that, and in no way victim blaming, but I do think that my mom's death was 100% preventable. And to that point, when I tell her story, it is my hope that people are walking away from that with the lesson that they need to know exactly how to prevent such a similar awful thing from happening again.
And I think your strength of telling that story and being able to pull out like you said, there was learning from that, takes that from what you mentioned for a safety class being, oh, this is just anecdotal, to, hey, this is a real life scenario that happened and let's learn from it.
Yeah, thank you. That's my hope, and I'll admit, it's not, I have not been this, pillar of strength and inspiration. I can promise you I am a hot mess express, but I do the very best that I can to help people. And, I didn't just wake up with this ability to tell this story. I talk very openly about, my personal mental health and taking care of my mental health. And, if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't represent my mom and what we're doing with this nonprofit very well.
Well, so you mentioned that earlier on, you said that your mother had done a lot of things right, but you also said that you feel like it could be preventable. And so one of your goals is to make sure that people understand, realtors understand what it is they need to be doing to protect themselves. So let's talk about some of those ideas. What are the things that make this scenario preventable in the future that people absolutely must be keeping in mind? Because we get into this mindset of, it won't happen to me. Oh, it's fine. And most of your clients, but then somebody comes along that you don't necessarily know, but I don't know, they sounded legit, so I'm just going to go meet them at the house. There's obviously a lot of potential areas where this can become a risk for people. And so, what are the things that some of the things that people need to be doing to protect themselves?
Yeah, so I could talk all afternoon on this, but we'll bust through some things.
Sure.
One, you just raised the point, and if you don't mind, I just want to kind of expand on it a little bit, and that is that of all that we do, and my mom had been in the business for at least a dozen years at the time she was taken. She had the privilege to serve hundreds of clients, tour thousands of properties, and yet it's as simple as it sounds. It's kind of hard to digest that after all that experience, all these transactions, all it took was one client and one showing, and I lost my mom. And so, from that, the things that we've learned from my mom that I hope that every agent can just take away. One is that bad guys fit that bad guys meet no definable profile. And, what I mean by that is, my mom was deceived by a husband and wife. And, so many of us, self-included, prior to this happening to my mom, based upon my own personal bias, I just would have never thought that a female could be capable of such violent crime. And so, I don't think that we can just limit it to that. I think that, sometimes we bring these biases to the table for whatever reason. And so we all have to fight that. We all have to screen people the exact same way, treat everyone the same. And it sounds noble when we do that for fair housing, but people don't think about the importance, I don't think, of it being fair from a screening perspective too. And to that point, when you talk about screening, it's real easy to say you're going to do it, but to be in a situation where, okay, well, what does screening mean? That means pre-showing new buyer consultations in a public place. And then, of course, that's limited and impaired because of COVID. And so, public spaces are, limited, and we're trying to limit, contact. So then I love to see agents that are really taking this and this pandemic as an opportunity to implement Zoom for pre-showing consultations. Next, getting a copy of that ID, asking for proof of funds. In my mom's case, these buyers had presented themselves as cash buyers. And so, to all these points, I love the name of this podcast, because it's like, if we are going to talk about implementing strategies to improve our personal safety, then we have to be real about it. And I think many of us, if we're honest with ourselves, it is super awkward to ask people to meet at Starbucks before you show them property, or to give you a copy of their ID whenever they've expressed that they're going to buy a $300,000 house. Or that if they say they are going to buy that $300,000 house with cash, having the scripting, having the words, feeling empowered to ask them for proof of that. And, it's always kind of maddening for me to see, and I know that there is a good place for scripting in our industry, because it helps us, be prepared and overcome objections, but you don't see a lot of emphasis placed on overcoming safety related objections. So how do you navigate this conversation? And so, something that I've learned for myself in this business is that I can do a better job of asking my new clients to meet me in a public place. And I know that is because, as I practice that, I don't have as many new buyers that are walking away from me. When I first started, I was like, it's the right thing to do. And my mom was murdered, so I'm just going to be, John Wayne, as I say out here about this in the Wild Wild West. And it can be off-putting. So just kind of, speaking friend to friend, professional to professional, I think if there's scripting that we should be focusing on, it is overcoming the safety objection. And by that doesn't mean, clever wordsmithing necessarily, but also showing your value and the value of those things. So other things just quickly about my mom's story that I think that we can learn from is that, she had used a client profile sheet, which is, great, consistent. You can get these, in a host of different places, including NAR, just to make sure that you're asking your clients the same questions. My mom had shared her itinerary with my dad, so when, while it wasn't enough to keep her safe, at least when she didn't come home, he knew exactly where to go look. And then the last thing I would say that we can all learn from my mom is, and I think this is much broader than real estate even, is that the next door neighbor saw several components of the actual kidnapping occur. So they saw the suspicious guy in the car that turned his car around and opened the trunk. That was all witnessed firsthand by the neighbor and stood out to that neighbor. It looked suspicious to that neighbor, but they didn't want to seem like they were being nosy or overreaching. So that wasn't actually reported to the authorities until much later that night when detectives were door knocking. So, kind of the last point, and I will admit I've been dismissive of it in the past, but of reporting suspicious behavior to the authorities in the moment. So
I think those are all some really fantastic tips. That the pre-screening, like you said, is key. I mean, that's what is going to protect you. And obviously people talk about a lot of things like, okay, maybe especially here in Oklahoma, I know where you live is probably very common as well, that people carry a firearm, for example, for personal protection. But that's still, to me, a very late in the game protection. Like, you're going to need that when things have already gotten really bad. You want to screen ahead of time so that hopefully you're not even getting into that situation, right? So that you don't want to have to wait until things have already gone off the rails and now you're having to dig in your purse to get a firearm or whatever. That's a last ditch effort thing, right? And so as much as you can do upfront before you ever even meet people when you're not familiar with them, and trusting your instincts. I know that's something that we hear about in some of these scenarios, or something just felt off, but I went anyway. And that's always a dangerous situation as well that you hear come up. And so you have to trust those and realize that a commission check isn't worth putting yourself in danger. And so I appreciate what you're saying about using the script, being prepared when somebody says, well, why are we meeting at Starbucks? Let's just meet at the house. Sure. How are you going to respond to that? And those are the things that are difficult to do on the fly if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. And, kind of to your point too, a standout, you just made so many great points, but is that what we do and what we like to focus on with the nonprofit when we're talking about safety is prevention. Because, while we may have this tool, whatever it is, if it's, a firearm or if it's a can of wall spray or it's the new greatest gadget on our phone, I think it's concerning for me to see people put every bit of their safety into one solution, especially one that is reactive.
Right. It should really be a tiered and layered approach. You mentioned having the latest gadget on your phone, and this is something that I've been thinking about and curious about, as well as I'm sure other people. The progress of technology, do you think that has helped or hindered realtor safety?
So let's start with the good, and then we'll get to the real. So it's encouraging. If you go back and you look over the last 3 years of the NAR's member safety report, for the last 3 years, there's between a 5 and 7% increase of agents reporting implementation of some sort of safety technology. So it's like, okay, well, it's cool to see that you're doing that. But are you really doing that? Or are you just kind of, I know surely with this fancy phone that I have that these features are here. It has been my personal experience in classes that I've given. And I say, this is not the blame game, the shame game, but how many of you, are aware that you could do, this or this with your, what you already have, just the, safety features built into your phone. And people are, yeah, I'm aware, but I don't really know how to do it. How many of you have turned on, how many of you have gone through the process of typing in your medical ID information or setting up your contact ring so that if you do hit that panic button that people are actually notified? It has been my experience by and large in this industry that people, they know that the technology exists, but they're not actually enabling it or using it to its fullest capacity. To the point that we were just talking about kind of proactive work instead of reacting. I mean, I don't know about you guys. Like, yes, it's cool to know that I could hit a panic button on this phone. But if somebody has tricked me all the way, if I've done my preventative thing and I find myself suddenly in a situation where I feel like my personal safety is at risk, I just don't know that I'm going to have my wits about me to be like, if you could just hang on just a second, I'm going to enable this on my phone and you're going to be in so much trouble. So there's that. And then a little bit more is that for those that do turn it on, it concerns me, just like with a firearm, that just because your spouse is receiving your GPS location at all times, like kudos to you for turning that on. But kind of to your point, make sure that there are layers. And then lastly, I've talked to a number of agents and they say, they feel like their part of their membership satisfaction is for their association to offer a free safety app. But in my experience with safety apps, I get that my perspective is hardly scientific. I'll be the first to admit that. But for the associations that have the typical safety app with the panic button or the timer while you're showing property, what I hear from association executives is that only 4 to 5% of members are actually even going in to enable it, and half of those are using it within 6 months. So to the point, I think that the technology is there. It's really incredible what's there. I would encourage everyone that you have in your hand, in your smartphone that you have, tools. I would guarantee you, most everyone listening to this, tools are there that you are not enabling. And before you go out and spend $20, $30 a month on some new fancy gizmo, I would encourage you to just make sure that you've maximized what you already have, that you've already paid for. So, I'm kind of all over the place in that response to say it's really cool to see where it's come, but I don't know that we're actually using it. I think that we still have some catching up to do with what already exists.
Yeah, that is such a tough topic of adoption of technology and utilizing it to its fullest extent. We could talk about that for a long time.
There's good tools available, but one, you got to use them consistently every time. For one, if you're going to have them, you got to use them. And it still goes to that: at what stage in the game is it protecting you? Is it when things have already gone wrong, and have you done everything up to it? I mean, you can't prevent absolutely everything, but as you kind of said up front, that many of these things, including what you felt on your mother's situation, could have been preventable. And that's what we want to make sure, is that we're doing absolutely everything we possibly can to prevent any of our realtors anywhere in the country getting into any kind of situation as much as we can.
One thing that I would add to what you just said, which you said it much better than I would, but based upon most of the technology that I see, without that screening piece that we were just talking about, which, by the way, screening would have made these bad people either abandon their plan or go on to another agent. It would have kept her safe because it would have stripped them of their anonymity. And to that point, it would have, made them say, I can't get away with this, so I'm going to go on. Next, though, I think it's important to note that most of the technology that we have in place, or that we see agents using to help keep them safe, in my mom's case, would have just enabled investigators, my dad, to either find the crime scene where she had been showing property, or maybe a step further to find my mom's body. It wouldn't have been enough to prevent the crime. So, well said. You said it with far fewer words. But it's just something to keep in mind.
I don't think we can say it too many times, and I don't think we can say it in too many different ways, because it has to be repeated, because even one person that we could prevent is it's a failure of all of us, right? Because if it's industry standard that everybody's doing proper screening, everybody's asking the questions to scare off people like this, to where if they call their third, fourth, fifth realtor that they're trying to run this scheme on, and everybody's doing what they can to protect themselves so that it scares these people off, that's what we have to do. It's got to become an industry standard, because if one person does it right and the second person, but then the third person doesn't, then that's the person who's going to become a victim. So it's got to be more than this 4, 5, 6% of realtors adopting it, it's got to be 100%. And so that's why we continue to have Realtor Safety Month every year. We're going to continue to talk about it. To that end, Carl, I wanted to touch on the foundation because we mentioned it, but we didn't go too much into it. And so where can people find the foundation? So I've been online and I see you even have some resources there, like a client profile form. There are other resources there. There's ways to get in contact with you, to have you come speak and have safety classes and all these kinds of things. So tell us a little bit more about what people can find with the foundation and where to find it.
All right. So the web address is beverlycarterfoundation.org. And, if you, to your point about some of the resources that are out there, if there's a spot on that website that is my absolute favorite, it is under the training tab under downloadable resources, because, if you're like me, and you are trying to make an impact on safety, then pick, because the topics get so broad, as evidenced as, we've kind of shown today in this podcast, that, it's to have good, meaningful conversations. Just pick one, focal point for agent safety, and those resources out there can help you have those conversations, have them in a sales meeting, pull them down, share them with your colleagues, and truly be a part of the solution. And then, of course, there are a number of things out there, and I hope that everyone will engage with us, because, I think that because of the, it's a blessing and a hindrance, in my opinion, kind of that agents are in an independent contractor kind of status. So that's great for our earning potential, and it benefits us in so many ways. But at the end of the day, because of our status, truly our personal safety is our own. It really takes our own strategy, our own implementation. We have to own it. And so we serve as a resource to help as however we can, to give you tools and resources, and to help keep you out of situations like my mom. Or I was just talking to a precious agent over the weekend that confided in me that a few years back she had been raped while showing property. And so it as emotional as this time of the year is for me, and a reminder of losing my mom while showing property. My mom, I think her story got so big because it resonated with so many people, but my mom was not the only one that's ever been victimized. And so that passion is fueled by every story, everything that I learn of people that were just trying to do their job, and these creeps took advantage of them. So, but I love what we do with the Beverly Carter Foundation. We are on social media. Hope you'll engage with us. If you see, I take good constructive feedback. So if you see something out there and you say, hey, here's another element of this safety concern to consider, hey, interact with us. Let's keep people safe. Let's keep the conversation going. I love it.
Yeah, we would encourage everyone to go check out the website, check out all those resources. And I mean, like you said, realtor safety is a group effort. And, like Jeff mentioned and you mentioned, if everyone does it, they'll deter people. But then on the flip side, it'll make it the norm, where you're not having that difficult conversation anymore, because that's what everyone does. It's the norm. It's the thing to do.
And I'm going to make a special pitch here too. So again, head on over to beverlycarterfoundation.org. Not only can you find these resources, you could book Carl or somebody to come out and come speak with you. Also, make a donation. This helps support this discussion to be ongoing. Like Carl mentioned, he's been to every state. He's been to Canada. We need this discussion to continue. I see that you can even set up your Amazon Smile account to support the foundation, which if you aren't using your Amazon Smile account, then we all are buying too many things on Amazon. So, do something that gives back to the realtor community. This is one way you can do that to help protect people and keep people from being a victim. So head on there, make a donation to help support this cause. I really, really encourage people to do that. And Carl, we want to thank you so much for taking out a little bit of time to come talk to us. Again, this is important to have this conversation. And we thank you so much for being willing to take your story and give back to help protect everybody in this industry.
Hey, my honor, guys. Anytime.
Thank you.
You know, obviously that is such a difficult story, and it's you know, fantastic that he has taken that to go advocate and really spread the word about what is necessary for realtors to be safe. And I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas about how to stay safe, but it is a holistic approach from the time you first interact with a new potential client, particularly somebody that you may not know, on a much personal friend level, all the way through to how you're going to interact with them in person, screen them, all these things, all the way through the end of a transaction and how you be safe. And again, this is something that has to happen every time without fail so that we are keeping realtors safe.
Right. Something big that I was thinking about during this was you can't just do it once, and you know, you might have the intention of doing it every time, but sometimes you don't. You have to be very intentional about the steps that you implement, and then you continue doing those steps to form it into a habit that then it just becomes second nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't want any more of these stories of realtors being a victim in their line of work. So be safe out there. If you have some ideas that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about or some feedback, please email us at podcast@OKRealtors.com. We always want to make sure that we're doing our job to feature good information for realtor safety. So please hit us up on that.
Right. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button and share this episode with all the realtors you know, because we all need to stay safe.
Absolutely. So until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday on Talking Real.